we'll be doing polling in just a little bit, but before we do, let me introduce you to what, as I said earlier, is I think one of our best panels and hopefully best webinars of the year. If we can go to our bio slides, our introduction to our panel. I've already introduced myself, so you know me, but I have three gentlemen who I actually met, all three of these. Well, I knew Sanjeev earlier, but John and Raghunath I met last year at IBM's Interconnect event in February, and we've stayed in, last February, we've stayed in contact ever since then, and I've had this notion of telling their story in a webinar, and it only took us 10 months, but we're here. So let me first introduce you to John LaFreniere. John is the Vice President of Global IT Architecture at Hertz, out of their brand new worldwide headquarters in Estero, Florida, which is just about an hour from me. John, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. And our next panelist is Raghunath Raman. Raghunath is out of New York, or it's still out of New York, correct, Raghunath? Raghunath?
I'm out of San Jose, California.
Now, San Jose, over in Silicon Valley. And Raghunath is with Kaiser Permanente, large healthcare provider, and he's the Director for Digital APIs and Integration Delivery. And our third, but certainly not our least panel member, is a good friend of mine, Sanjeev Sharma, CTO, DevOps Technical Evangelist, Distinguished Engineer at IBM, and also author of DevOps for Dummies, which second edition was recently released. Sanjeev, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks John and Raghu also for joining this panel. I think this is going to be a very exciting panel we have.
Absolutely. So, as I said earlier, I wanted to start off with a couple of polling questions, gentlemen, for our audience to give you a better idea of who's listening here today. We had quite a high number of people register, and hopefully they'll partake in our poll. So our first question is cloud an integral part of your DevOps strategy? And many of you will probably say yes, but we want to know, is it public cloud, virtual private or private cloud, or a little of both, hybrid cloud, or perhaps no is the answer. So please give us your answers. I hope we got all of the choices in there, and hopefully it's doesn't take too long to get us your answer. And we'll close this question off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And survey says, I always feel like Richard Dawson. So as I expected, I don't know if folks in my panel agree, but almost 60%, 58, well over half, are involved in hybrid as an integral part of their DevOps strategy, and that's both on-premise and cloud. 10% are pure public, 15% are pure private, and here, well, maybe this number is a little higher than we expected. 18% cloud is not part of their DevOps strategy, or perhaps maybe they have no DevOps strategy at all. We can discuss that a little bit further on. And let's go to our next polling question then. And this is an interesting question that I always ask when I'm interviewing people around the world about DevOps. So what is the approach to the DevOps transformation at your organization? Is it top-down, meaning there's it's executive driven, there's executive cover, it's executive led, or is it bottom-up? You know, this was a grassroots kind of thing that's being done on a project-by-project basis, and it's not a skunkworks per se, but there really is no very senior level executive that's kind of mandating it. And again, if you can give us your answer, and I realize not everyone may fit into one of these two boxes. Sometimes it's from the middle out, right? Going both top and bottom. But if just one of two, we'll close this off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And our survey says, wow, It's close, but I thought it would actually be close the other way. 54% say bottom up, 46% say top down. Gentlemen, is that a surprise to you?
A year ago, maybe. Not as much of a surprise to me now.
Okay.
I think the numbers keep driving.
Yeah. Sanjeev, what about you?
No, I think it's not a surprise. What I would like to, maybe we could have twisted this question a little bit to make it more interesting, is where did you start? Because I think people always end up here, where it is, a combination of top-down and bottom-up. The question, would be, did you start here, and have you ended up where, while you might have started at one end, you ended up where having to do both? Because that eventually is, I think, what is needed, and that's the pattern we are seeing over and over again with multiple clients of ours, is you need to do both. You might start up at one end, you might have initiated with one end, but you'll end up wanting to do both, needing to do both top down and bottom up.
Yeah, and you know what? One of our attendees, Vincent Epner, and if I mispronounced your name, I apologize. That's exactly what he had in the question section, which is it's really both, and it probably does take both to have a successful DevOps transformation at some point. Someone else from the audience asked, can the poll results show the total number of responders? And unfortunately, the way the system is set up, it doesn't, but I will tell you, we have just under 200 people here. 176 are in at this very second, and over 76% voted on this. So you could do the numbers and kind of see for yourself if it doesn't hurt your head, doing a little arithmetic. But anyway, that's that question. I believe, did we have one other question, Jules? Yes? Okay, here's our last poll question before we dive in, guys. Which of the technologies are you employing in your digital transformation? And we're only asking you to select one. We realize it may be more than one, but if you had to pick one, which one would it be? Containers such as Dockers, etc., microservices, hybrid cloud, or none of the above? And again, if we can get your vote, I don't want to waste too much time, because our panelists have a lot to share with you. So we'll close things off here in, just give it another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that, by the way, for anyone watching along at home, that was about 66% of our attendees, which are up over 180 now, are voting. Wow. 31% of Docker, 31% of hybrid cloud, and 22% none of the above. I would suspect that many of the people doing microservices are probably using containers as well. Raghu, what do you think?
I think the none of the above is interesting, where it's probably indicative. It's probably indicative of early adoption, I guess, or maturity of where they are. There's some flavor of this that is probably needed in what we're generally calling DevOps. And so it could also mean there's a lot of automation that already exists, and DevOps is being done as DevOps, but they don't use some of these technologies. So but the none of the above is a little surprising to be that high.
Yeah, agreed. Okay.
Right. This Sanjeev, if I may jump in, Alan.
Sure.
I think there's also from the none of the above question, and this question can be misleading in a way. What does digital transformation mean here, right? Because if a customer has, if a company has already, heavily digitized, and they have automation in place, do they put under none of the above? Are they, or do they go under hybrid cloud? I think that definition of digital transformation becomes, it can be subjective. I would have loved to ask this question. Again, I keep twisting your questions, Alan, I apologize. Is how many of what technologies are you adopting to talk about innovation, right? To be more innovative, right? I think to be on that cutting edge and experiment with new technologies or new business models. Are you using any of these technologies for that? I think that might have reduced that none of the above answer, that big number there. But that's again just my opinion on it. So maybe people can post some of their comments in the chat session, regarding innovation. Maybe we can get some conversation going regarding that.
Absolutely. With that being said, let's, and by the way, folks, we're sharing these results on Twitter for anyone following along. Our Twitter handle is devops.com. That's DEVOPSDOTCOM. That being said, though, let's jump, and it's in our chat window. Let's jump to our slides if we can. Okay, so I've introduced you to our speakers, and I believe John LaFreniere from Hertz is going to lead off. Why don't we move to first slides there, please? Okay, John, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is John LaFreniere. As Alan mentioned, I'm the head of architecture for Hertz, and Hertz has been around for a long time. All of you have heard the brand, I'm sure. We're nearly a 100-year-old company, and the company did not focus a lot on technology in the previous 20-plus years, actually. And so upon arriving here with many of my closest IT friends as part of a large rebuild, if you will, or transformation of the company, we found that we had huge technology debt. Did a lot of effort, a lot of time and effort assessing systems, and realized that we weren't going to be able to upgrade a lot, so we needed to make a major transformation. Moving to cloud and leveraging cloud and SaaS technologies was the logical course of action. And then as we kind of keep pressing down that road, it appeared to us that what we needed to do was focus more on buying and building less. So that's where the phrase, the config ops versus DevOps phrase comes up, and talked about this a little bit at Interconnected IBM last year, and that the focus early on for us is to buy products, buy SaaS offerings, try to configure those offerings within the paradigms or within the rule sets that are given to us by the various SaaS providers, and try to do as little custom code as possible until we get further down our transformation where we start having to write or build custom code. So, but net, the Hertz transformation is, oops, I think I went 2 slides, sorry. The Hertz transformation is one that is rooted in a lot of technology debt, and is aiming at an endpoint type of a strategy. So because of that, our journey actually started very top down, very much a CIO-led effort. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it on the cloud. A lot of effort by myself and others in establishing that strategy, the cloud-first strategy, understanding where we might choose to use different things like containers versus microservices, where we're using both, what clouds we buy in, what SaaS services we buy, what large partners and firms do we align ourselves with to start the process of transforming our core applications. Because for Hertz, this is about our core, these are our core applications. These are the applications that we rent cars with. These are the applications that we manage our fleet with. These are the applications that we track financials with, and all the core things that it takes to run our business is what we're focused on transforming to the cloud as part of our company-wide DevOps strategy. So, like I said, it was more of a top-down effort here. It's now getting groundswell and mid-swell, I guess you'd say, and there's a lot of enthusiasm around the transformation, but it definitely started top-down. Also, the comment there about the strategy. the culture of the company was not, like I said, we had not done a lot with our technology for more than 20 plus years, so the culture was not ready for the amount of change, the speed of change, and the target, really, the target state of changing everything, and a lot of very difficult discussions, where entire platforms are being sunsetted and being replaced by brand new systems, being either purchased and configured, or in some cases written, but complete takeout of old systems. And so the impact to the culture, both inside of IT and outside of IT, folks that have been around for a long time, it's a tough pill to swallow to think of an application that you may have worked on for 20 years is basically been deemed, that it's the best thing we can do with it is replace it holistically versus evolving it anymore. But at the end of the day, it was good for the company, and it aligned to some of the other transformations that were happening around leadership and things in the company. So, this strategy and the top-down aspect of it, it goes all the way from our board down. This is our transformation, and aspects of the technology transformation have been discussed openly, as part of our public disclosure of our numbers for, we're a public company, so our investors are informed of all of this, and so this is a very, very public, very well-known, if you will, DevOps journey that we're embarking on. Multiple years, it'll be over 4 years when it's all done. We've got a little over 3 left to go. But very very committed as a company to doing it. So to kind of close out without going into a lot of detail, I could talk for days on this stuff, and obviously you guys want to hear from the other panelists as well. So I wanted to bring out a couple of these challenges, the things that have come about in the last year and a half of really doing this at scale, at speed, tens to hundreds of millions of dollars of effort and investment. So really 100% committed. Some of the things that I've noticed that might be able to help you a little bit. The first one, the point, cloud isn't magic. That's a little bit of a note, gently poking towards our CIO and other leaders within IT and outside of IT. I think there's a big misperception that because the infrastructure barrier is so much lower when it comes to cloud, there's an assumption that the barrier is that low for everything, that everything just is easier or dramatically easier, or doesn't even need to be taken care of just because it's cloud. And those of you that are doing much within cloud, I think you realize that that's not the case. But this is a misnomer, I think, that especially if you do much in the way of financial planning within your company and things like that, you got to make sure that this belief is not pervasive amongst your leadership, because if the belief is that cloud is magic, then the assumption is that it is always cheaper in every way, shape, or form. And though there are cost efficiencies, with cloud, and it is definitely the best way to move strategically in our current IT set, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything you do there is going to be cheaper. Like I said, the resources associated with cloud still need to be fully understood. It's a different resource model, and if you end up in a pure hybrid mode where you're both data center and cloud, again, that's another area where this looking at your costs and understanding, what the cost structure of those multiple environments is, and what resources it takes and to run it is very important, and it's very important to make sure that leadership throughout the organization understands that, so that you're not caught trying to support things in a cloud environment without the proper staffing. My second point is a point that's counter to some of the large cloud providers, actually, who don't have a problem with you being in a hybrid state where you're using some of their real estate and some of your own. For Hertz, this would be a death sentence if we were to take this strategy on. The reason being is we have a legacy of not finishing projects properly, shutting down the old application and things like that. So you end up with a lot of duplication and stuff. And if we were to head towards a hybrid environment for cloud at Hertz, we would end up in the same place. We would have, I would spin up cloud instances, and I would still have my data center stuff. And I wouldn't really get to some of the financial savings that we want to achieve, as well as the operational savings and the higher uptimes and all the other advantages associated with cloud. But so much of a data center, if you think about your data center, so much of the cost of your data center gets tied up in what I call, the last week of shutting down the data center. In other words, the network has to sit there till the very end, your storage has to sit there till the very end, your security has to be there till the very end, all of the communications and connectivity for WAN. A lot of your highest dollar items are the last pieces to be removed, if you will, from a data center. So, if the strategy is to move to cloud for cost reduction or data center reduction, you got to go all the way, or it's going to be a failed effort. If you're using the cloud to extend your data centers and to extend services and applications and make things more flexible, if the justifications are different, then hybrid may be a great place to go. But if you're trying to get out of the data center business, hybrid is a death sentence.
Absolutely. And John, I'm really glad you ended with that, because to me that was one of the unique things. I remember watching you up on the main stage in Las Vegas last February and thinking to myself, wow, just wow, they are taking a bold plan of transformation here, where I think many people kind of stick one toe in the water, then stick 3 toes in the water, then maybe put their leg in by doing this hybrid kind of two-step, if you will, or maybe it's a 4-step or more, where you guys are really saying, hey, I'm at the data center now, but as we turn on our public cloud, infrastructure, or, we're shutting it. We're not, we're just shutting down what we have back at the on-prem, and kind of skipping that whole, leapfrogging the whole hybrid step, if you will. And my experience is that that's not what the majority of people have done. And I wonder, obviously you guys are committed to it, and you're already well into it, and it seems to be working. But did people say, hey, this is not the way? Did people try to discourage you from doing that?
Well, I think the key word, you said it, is committed, and both connotations are appropriate. There have been multiple times, many different either suppliers or industry folks. I do a lot of work with IBM, obviously, and folks have looked at the plan, the big plan, the multi-year plan, and looked at all the different major initiatives that we are going to have going on in parallel. And yeah, absolutely, people think we're crazy. It's nothing I've ever done at this to this extreme, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about the state of affairs when I arrived here, but a lot of it has to do with where we were and the only way to get the company where it wanted to be to enable the business, specifically marketing, sales, and revenue management, which are key aspects to the rent-a-car business, and IT was holding back those portions of the company in dramatic fashion, especially marketing. There's some very basic functionality that some things that they should be able to do that we simply can't do because of our back-end systems, and in some cases those systems are in excess of 30 years old and they're still major cogs in the machine that make us rent cars. And so you start getting a system where you're only as good as your weakest link, and then when you start looking at DevOps and you look at the web and mobile and how fast that's moving and the expectation for people to be able to do anything they want from those devices through those mechanisms, if your back end can't support it, there's not a lot you can do. You can make the front end look as pretty and as nice as you want, but if you can't support the function of the box that somebody's clicking on, then you simply can't move forward. And that's the situation we found ourselves in. So that's where we stepped back and just said it's all got to go. We've just got to rebuild it. And then we looked at different timelines and scenarios, and if we did it over 5 or 6 years, we just stranded too many pieces along the way. We just said we got to rip the Band-Aid, and we've got to do it all at once, and we've got to do it fast and with commitment.
Yep. You know what, John, we have some questions already from the audience that we'll come back to at the conclusion. I have some more questions as well, but in the interest of giving everyone their fair share, let's move over to Raghu and understand a little bit about what he's done at Kaiser. Raghu, you want to take it from there? Next slide.
Yes. Let me try to get the next slide.
Looks like it's working. There we go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Raman. I manage an engineering team here at Kaiser, which is in APIs and in integrations. And majority of the APIs that we build and deliver are consumer-facing or member-facing or public-facing. My team is currently not doing API integrations that are with the workforce or providers and doctors and so on. We are very public focused, and what we say is we bridge the gap between systems of engagement and systems of record. So that's a context of what we are doing. Giving you a quick background of how Kaiser is and what we do. We have about 10.6 million members, 38 hospitals, a large number of medical offices, physicians, nurses, and so on. This is some data from the previous quarter that we have. And some notion of what happens on the digital channel. This data is a little old, and it's probably doubled by now in terms of usage that is there. This gives you a context of what is happening in terms of number of people, how many results it is. This is important for us because it matters for health and patient safety. People's lives are touched on a daily basis. When you want to schedule an oil change, it's okay if you don't have an appointment today and it works out on the weekend, and you can schedule it around that. When you have a problem with a cough in a child, you need to do it right away. And we see more and more people adopting the digital channel to get in touch with their doctors, to order their meds, to do whatever it is. And life being the most important thing and health being very critical, we change the way healthcare is experienced and delivered and enabled digitally. So that's a context of what it is. Go to the next slide. I think just before I go, there were a number of topics that John touched on where there's a lot of similarity between what's happening at Kaiser and Hertz, and it's probably true in some of the larger enterprises. And I'll come to that. Before we going into why DevOps, or what is driving the need for, or why did we just do it? And it's possible that a lot of companies and a lot of us are doing DevOps even before the term happened. We can say label it as automation, we can label it as tools and technology, pipelines, and saying why this new word of DevOps, or what's different in this, and so on. So we'll come to that. But I think that from Kaiser's standpoint, there are 3 or 4 things that are key. We had regulation changes that happened a few years ago that changed the way the markets operate. We have digital disruption. What I'm talking about is the advent of several frameworks, whether it's a JavaScript frameworks or tools or technology, or the ability of provisioning systems in the cloud or containers, or the amount of tools and technology that is available in the IT landscape is significantly changing. The consumer behavior is critical. There is now a very clear need by a consumer about how they want to do things. And I was just listening to John and said, hey, Hertz has a challenge. Everybody knows about it with Uber and Lyft and so on. So what is it that, why would apart from the business model, they need to be able to access whatever they want digitally as quickly as they want. And yes, you can paint and have a beautiful front end, but if the backend systems don't change, there's a different problem. And I understand John's and Hertz's philosophy of how they're going to change the backends and so on. We don't have that luxury, or we don't have that leeway of changing some of the backend systems. Think of Kaiser as 7 companies within one brand name, which is 7 regions, and they all have their regional systems, their regional membership, and regional healthcare and pharmacy applications, and so on. And over a 70 plus year period, these systems in some ways are antique and may not be upgradable. So how do you expose digital functionality? How do we react to the competition, to the changing tools? Because things that we need to do in the multi-speed world, where certain systems move at a different pace than others, our objectives are, we have to lower the cost. We have to be able to market faster time to market. We have to be able to reuse. We need better productivity. And APIs are a prime candidate that help bridge some of this, but it is multiple pieces that need to be touched along the way. I want to go to a couple of topics that I think we've spoken about, and saying, is DevOps a culture or is it an enterprise? What does that really mean? I think the word culture is used in multiple ways. I'd rather take a step back and say, when an enterprise has grown over a period of time, certain things would have transpired through that organization, where you say, okay, somebody's going to manage all the infrastructure in the data centers, and therefore it's an infrastructure group. And somebody's going to have some scale or critical mass in which you are going to have skills in development, and then you made the engineering department, and so on. These silos started forming, and the word silo is used, I'm using it loosely, but it is how organizational and people structure created these organizational boundaries, not from a functional standpoint. DevOps is really talking about how, and one of the challenges that any large enterprise is going to face is putting an assembly line that traverses through an organizational boundary structure. Tools are easy to do, but if you have control over all of the tools from end to end, you have much better control. But the culture challenges are, how do you adopt a process or implement a pipeline and implement automation that spans across functional units that were created at a point in time to serve certain needs. It's not, and that's the barriers that we find. And say each organization functions in a particular way because they were built up in a particular way to solve a specific purpose at a particular point in time. So you could have an organization that says, oh, I'm going to have my data center operations outsourced to vendor X. And every change request goes once a week on Saturdays, and that's the process, and that's the SLA that's been set up. If the dev team wants to start releasing code every 2 hours, well, you have a process that was set in place. You need to change the mindset and understand, okay, if this is the need, what else needs to change? So that's the cultural barrier in terms of saying you're trying to impose or you're trying to adopt a process that goes across functionally set principles or functionally set paradigms that exist because of a point in time. What DevOps does is helps put that tooling and customer-provider relationship between each of these organizations and say, if you can smoothen that out, then you have a way to do it. Things that start suddenly becoming apparent is saying a development team would never bothered about or would really rarely bother about how a piece of code was executed or how many JVMs or what was there in production, how many clusters, how many there. Because you wrote a piece of code, you tested it in a non-prod environment, and you shipped it over, and somebody else was responsible for doing that. With DevOps comes saying you have now visibility end to end and saying, I need to understand how this piece of code will run there. It puts the onus of load testing, capacity planning, security, end to end, right from the developer to the tester to the ops. They're all in the game. So that's something that DevOps has to foster and saying we are all in this together. I think one of our leaders had said earlier, we are all in this boat. It doesn't make a difference on which side the hole is. You can't say I'm rowing well on my side. If the hole is there on any side of the boat, we all go down. DevOps is something similar where you need buy-in to say we need to have a way that we all have visibility and clear handoffs and have automation for that. Couple of things that I think just reacting to what some of the poll answers and questions were cloud, and I saw a higher number where people said they were not using cloud. That's not wrong or it's not right. I think one of the reasons why Kaiser is moving to the cloud is purely because of the ability and the nimbleness that we need to be able to scale infrastructure. A few years ago, it always meant racking and stacking and doing things, the bare metal. Well, today, if that is available as a service and if it is a cloud where I have APIs to be able to provision VMs and do something, that is something that allows its time to market and how quickly can I do it. So it's definitely need-based where you say, if infrastructure is not part of your challenges, then no. If it is, then yes. Some of the challenges that we really have or I'm going to go back to saying what are the challenges that we have. We have multiple systems, multiple regions, a need for multiple releases to go simultaneously, multiple consumers of the APIs. So we have mobile apps, at least there are 3 or 4 official apps in the App Store for Kaiser. We have the IVR channel, kp.org as a channel, and we have certain call centers calling our APIs to access data that the member has been seeing. All of these have their own cadences. How do you build something that can be nimble and move quickly in releases? Which means the testing, in the past we would have long testing cycles and long regression cycles. We want to be in a way where they say, okay, if there is the consumer, and the definition of my consumer in this point for me is an application. If they want to move with a different version of an app, I want to be able to provide a service that is only consumed by them. And I want to be able to deploy it in a JVM or a container that is going to be consumed by them. I don't want to spend a 3-month cycle ordering hardware? Can I provision it in a way that is on demand, that's elastic, and isolate them from everybody else? How do I have isolation and scale and get to market? So those are some of the drivers that are saying, how can I do frequent releases and with infrastructure and with cloud? That's where some of these patterns fall into play, which is saying whether it's a combination of microservices, it's a combination of containers, it's a combination of cloud with specific need of why we are doing that. I want to touch upon something that John said earlier, cloud is not magic or that thing. I think it is, at Kaiser we recognize it very well. Well, I think when people are, and specifically it needs to be understood as to what costs are CapEx, what costs are OpEx. How do you do that? And what is the cost of standing it up? What's the cost of running it? What's the cost of monitoring it? And John very well said it's not magic. It comes with a price. And the ease of use should not be mistaken for lower costs. Ease of use helps with certain things, but you need to understand what it costs to do that. There was one other item I think wanted to touch on. A lot of the tools, I mean, we have startups and other places where they are able to move in a very nimble way quickly. I think as enterprises, we may not be able to move nimble because of different investments that have been made into IT, different structures that exist organizationally, but being able to adapt and adopt certain tools that make sense for meeting your objective. Be selective about what problem you're solving and then pick those tools in your DevOps journey. I think that's how I would say choose figure out the goal that you're trying to do and then start going around that. The last comment I want to end up is I think the bottom-up versus top-down approach. I think it was somewhere, I think a lot of places are going to be middle out. The sponsorship and the driver could be somewhere else. I think that there are, in a large organization like Kaiser, there are units and groups that are doing DevOps in so-called a way to optimize and make things, bring down cost and automate things and so on. Do we have the pipeline end-to-end? Perhaps no. How do we stitch all these pipelines and have a chain that goes across each of these handoffs? I think that's something that is important. And I think at Kaiser, we have taken a very conscious decision to say we are going to invest in this to automate and have more environments and more automation to enable faster delivery, and this is the executive sponsorship that allows us to do this. So there's some notion of something that was already happening and then we decided to invest to make it better. So it was kind of a middle out, upward top, and then it spread as saying we all need to do it. I can stop there and wait for questions.
You know what, Raghu? We've got to give Sanjeev a chance, but we have a lot of questions and we're running low on time. But Sanjeev, let's turn it over to you to bring this home and get us over to the question section afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, so let me kind of, people will have access to the slides, and, this has been a great conversation, a great set of presentations so far, both from John and Raghu. So my role is a bit different in the sense that I do not work, while I work at IBM, I do not work in IBM development. So I am not the person helping our developers here at IBM adopt DevOps. We have an entire team dedicated to that. And we are probably one of the largest global companies, which is focused on adopting DevOps. My experience, and where I think I have a unique seat at the in the stadium of DevOps adoption, is that I get to observe and work with hundreds of customers, including Hertz and Kaiser around the world, to help them adopt DevOps, understand the challenges they are facing, and along the way learn a few things. And one of the things we have been doing at IBM, between me and the team I work with, is looking for patterns and anti-patterns, right? And you heard some of them. be mentioned by John and Raghu, right? The slide you're seeing here is our attempt at modeling some of these patterns, right? And I alluded to this earlier on, right, about definition of innovation, right, and definition of digital transformation. And if you look at what Raghu and John spoke about as to what the business drivers were of the transformations their organizations went through, they did a little bit of both. They did like at Hertz, and I know we don't have too much time to go back and forth, but I'd love to hear maybe after I've gone through a couple of my slides, hear John's comment on this. It sounded more like an optimization effort to modernize what you already had, rather than just creating brand new business models or brand new engagement systems of engagement to work with customers. It was your core business systems which you were modernizing, right? In this model you see here on the screen, we are showing that all applications and all DevOps adoption efforts are spread across a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, which is the bottom of this slide, you have what is known as the industrialized core. These are when you are modernizing or optimizing your core business applications, right? You already are running a business, you already have IT systems which are running that business, and you're focusing on improving them, either totally modernizing them or just optimizing what you have in place. The problem is well understood, the solution is well understood, you might be using new technology to deliver it. At the innovation edge, which is the other end of the spectrum, and please note, I'm not talking about bimodal here, right? I'm talking about a spectrum. And at the end of the day, you want it to be a normal distribution across these two ends. At the other end of the spectrum, you have what we are referring to as the innovation edge. Here is where you're focused on creating new applications or new capabilities in your applications to really innovate, to come up with new business models, to come up with new ways to engage with your customers. You might be running a lot of experiments here to really not just understand the solution, but also in a lot of cases to understand the problem and find the problem solution match. So how you adopt DevOps varies based on whether the kind of applications you are adopting DevOps for is on one end of the spectrum or the other, or somewhere in the middle. So I think this is where we've had a lot of success in helping customers fine-tune their DevOps adoption and not take missteps or not fall into some of the anti-patterns. Now, what is interesting here, and what you see in those red circles and lines in this chart, is that these are not isolated, right? If you're talking to a large company with multiple applications, there are always dependencies across these multiple applications. So you might have these multiple delivery pipelines where you have focused on eliminating the silos, as Raghu was talking about, which are between the different functional areas, right? You eliminated or reduced the silo between Dev and Ops, right? That's where DevOps started, or between Dev and QA, or between the business and the IT side, or between your operations team, which is gathering feedback and running the systems, and your delivery teams, which are building and delivering the applications. But you also need to eliminate the swim lanes, for lack of a better term, which gets created between these delivery pipelines. Because if there is dependencies, if you do not optimize your delivery pipelines across the spectrum, you can only go as fast as your slowest delivery pipeline if you have a dependency on it, right? So your unoptimized areas can create a lot of drag when it comes to wanting to go fast or wanting to innovate. Also, if you look at large IT organizations, one other common pattern we are seeing is that most of their IT budgets are being consumed by the industrialized core, by run and maintain, by keeping the lights on. Optimizing those industrialized core applications frees up resources to invest more in innovation. So they have to go hand in hand. So this is a model we've been working a lot on. If you come to Interconnect, we'll be talking a lot about this as we go forward. And let's move to the next slide. I don't believe I have control here. So if you can go to the next slide, Jules, that would be great. Excellent. So one of the things we have done at IBM is we've started capturing our learned lessons, both by adopting DevOps at scale across IBM, but also through the hundreds of customers we've worked with. And we have captured this all as something we refer to as the IBM Garage method, which is a methodology we are working on, and it is, it is something we are continuously improving on as we learn more and more lessons and as we experiment, quite frankly, also with some of the content. But something we released earlier on, which I actually had the privilege of co-leading the effort, was the DevOps reference architecture, which is what you're seeing here on this screen. And this is available free of cost to anybody who wants to go download it and look at it and understand the practices and the capabilities behind it at this URL on the screen. And it is platform and technology agnostic, right? So you can implement it based on your technology stack which you might be using, and it can be implemented both whether you're doing innovation driven adoption or optimization driven adoption. Could you go to the next slide, please? Actually, I do have control. Very good. So the one thing we do use to engage with our clients, and if you are an IBM customer or want to be an IBM customer and are wondering how do we engage with customers, with some of our clients, to understand what would be the best path for them to adopt DevOps, how do we balance that top-down and bottom-up, which we spoke about, how do we balance the optimization, the innovation kind of applications, how do we optimize, what is the right place for cloud to be introduced and in what manner, how do we decide whether we should go into microservices or containers or not. One of the things we do at IBM is we run this half-day-long workshop called the DevOps Optimization and Innovation Workshop. In this workshop, our goal is to identify where is the waste in your delivery pipeline. So we take an exemplar pipeline and do a value stream mapping of the pipeline, looking across and looking for areas where there might be bottlenecks or sources of waste. Once you identify them, then you can narrow it down and say which DevOps capability can help you address that area of waste or a bottleneck, as you call it. So it helps you create a first pass or a skeleton of a prioritized DevOps adoption roadmap from which you can move forward and go into a large-scale DevOps transformation. So if you're more interested in this, we'd be more than happy to follow up during the Q&A session. We've helped several large customers. Of course, you already heard from Kaiser and Hertz today, but we have also several other IBM customers across the world, different sizes here and different geographies who we have helped adopt. We've already spoken a lot about our interconnect coming up in 2017, but we also have some interesting videos which were published from past interconnect. So that's what's on this slide here. But with it, I'll pass it back to Alan so we can take the few minutes we have and open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Sanjeev. I know we kind of put a gun to your head on time there. I appreciate you moving it along. I don't want to take a lot of time chatting either, except to say, hey, if you can get to interconnect, that's where I first saw all three of these guys, and I highly recommend that you, if you can get there, go. The links are there. Let's jump into questions. First, this was a question I think for John, and there was a few questions on this subject. How do you manage the risk in terms of data security?
Well, you have a very dedicated CISO that's a peer of yours that works hand in hand with you, and as we get into some of the big SaaS deals, before we close those deals out, obviously we bring security to the table and make sure that we are able to meet the 2B security parameters for the company. I say the 2B because we're raising our security profile as we go into the new world. So what has been okay before is no longer okay going forward. So we're raising the bar, and we just, like I said, we get ourselves to where we're at the threshold and getting ready to get into detailed statement of work and signing up for large blocks of work, and we bring security in and validate the details of the particular security profile needed for that particular deployment. And then what we'll also do as we move into an environment closer to like that of Kaiser, where we have developers and people starting to kind of more traditional DevOps spinning up their own things will have profiles and templates that meet minimum standards already built and provisioned so that folks can use those services and we don't have to worry about them breaking security rules.
Excellent. The next question was around, directed to you, John, around InfoSec and public cloud. It's one of the major impediments at this person's own organization that's forcing them to stay hybrid. Was there a specific public cloud or that you, more than you've already hit on?
Well, I struggle with the term hybrid. I consider myself hybrid, but I'm not hybrid as to what most definitions are. I have no cloud environments in my own data center. I'm hybrid from the perspective of I'm in multiple clouds, and I'm also in different clouds at different levels. So yes, we are doing some public cloud. Yes, there are some InfoSec security concerns that you need to have with all of the different clouds, depending upon what it is that you're trying to do and everything. But that's also why virtual private and private space is available to all of them. So I've got a large investment in IBM private Bluemix Cloud. I have environments with Azure. I have and then I have a large SaaS environment that's being built out through a partner in AWS that is actually a dedicated environment that their dedicated environment within AWS. We will be doing some AWS public, and so basically there is no perfect answer. Every project that you have, depending upon those InfoSec requirements, may or may not inhibit you from one public cloud or another, or cause you to take on additional things. My previous destination before coming to Hertz was at GMAC Financial or Ally Financial, and we were able to do some things, move some things for that bank and financial institution that people didn't think were, that we could do before. And it's just a matter of asking the right questions and sitting down with security people and trying to work out what truly are requirements versus maybe best practice, and how do you get as much of that profile knocked out as possible.
Absolutely. Okay. Another one for you, John, what was the legacy application architecture at Hertz that's being replaced?
I have lots of Micro Focus COBOL. So okay. if you want to start with mainframe and COBOL and go all the way up to the very early stages of SOA, and then stop and take 15 years off, that's pretty much the Hertz legacy environment. It's not quite that bad, but it's very old.
Got it. Let's jump to a Kaiser question here. And Raghu, this is for you. Does Kaiser use a public cloud for all of its systems or a private cloud? How did they overcome security challenges of having sensitive data in cloud?
I think it's all going to be private. We are not given the needs and around PHI. We are going to be in a private cloud. There are, like how John mentioned, there are certain assets that we will put on the public cloud, which could be content or marketing and certain other things, and they could be on a different cloud by themselves. But anything to do with PHI, that's a private cloud.
Okay, excellent. This is probably, again, for you, Raghu. Ours is a medical devices company with several million lines of legacy code architected and written years ago with complex architectural dependencies. 20 gigs of binaries, nightly builds take 10 minutes, tests are extensive. How can microservices and containerization help in reducing our build, deploy, and testing cycles? Or do you have any thoughts on anything else they might be able to do? And I'm going to open that up to all three of you. I mean, see, we have a large healthcare provider here with large legacy infrastructure software written directly for infrastructure. Does microservices and containerization offer any help to them? Sanjeev, that might be something for you.
Sure. So I think that's an excellent question, and we've helped some large companies with very large code bases start the microservice journey, right? So, but there are many factors involved there, right? It's not as straightforward. You can't just pull out code, detangle it, and say I have microservices. Sometimes the data becomes, denormalizing the data to separate out the persistence components to each microservice you harvest becomes a more complex effort. If you go to IBM Developer Works, there is an excellent series of papers by Kyle Brown, K-Y-L-E-B-R-O-W, and Kyle Brown, one of my colleagues. That would be a great place to start, so you get an idea of what the effort required is. But I would say that it is not, it is something, it's a journey which can be embarked upon, and you take it one step at a time. And you should look at by saying, what are the services which are not deeply embedded in this monolithic code, which I want to expose first because they can help me innovate or speed up changes in some way. Maybe there are certain areas of the application which change very rapidly. There are certain areas which are used by other applications very often. Those would be the ones where you would start. Again, this could be a day-long seminar by itself. So I think starting with some of those papers we published would be a great place. Also, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is available on this deck, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about how we would embark on that journey with you.
Great. I know we're over time. I'm going to take one last question, and that'll put us 5 minutes over. I appreciate the many of you have stayed.
I just wanted to add something to this.
Raghu, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think one of the key things in your question, I think, which makes it challenging is your dedicated hardware. If there is a way for you, for whoever asked this question to say, is there a way to use the same piece of code? I mean, it seems like this is a single assembly line because you have dedicated hardware. If you have the opportunity to have multiple assembly lines, and your pattern of microservice, or your pattern just becomes you have the ability to launch multiple builds simultaneously, and each of those lines are delivering certain pieces of functionality. The code base refactoring is a different approach. And also the question I would have is, if it's 10 hours is what it takes, then do you really want to break it? And what's driving you to break it? What is the reason you want to break it? Are you trying to solve the 10-hour problem, or are you trying to solve the hardware problem? Which problem are you trying to solve will determine whether you do cloud or microservices or containers, or which piece of it is.
Absolutely. So guys, one more question. I think we're going to have to call it a wrap. I apologize. And this is really, is almost like a multi-speed IT question. How do you deliver app or call center solutions in daily releases, or even every 2 week releases, when back-end systems that give you services are in monthly or quarterly release? And that's kind of at the core of a lot of the, I don't know if you, Sanjeev, but Rosalind and the IBM Z Systems Enterprise Group. I mean, this is what they're dealing with every day. And John, it's kind of a problem you guys haven't had at Hertz, right? Trying to speed up while still having that back end. But who would like to take a shot at answering that one?
I can jump in real quick. This is John. Just on the surface, I agree with you. This, we were faced with those questions, and instead of trying to answer them, or solve for them in pieces, that's when we realized that we had too many of them, and that our problem was the back-end systems first and foremost. And then once we got ourselves free of those, then those other front-end systems, if you will, or those other processes, fell in line. And since we're aligning business processes to the to-be DevOps IT processes, in other words, we're not trying to keep our business processes the same either. We're just transforming it all at the same time, and to avoid that problem. I mean, that wasn't the problem we were trying to avoid, but we did see that one on the horizon when we were looking at our options, and you know, saw it as a benefit of doing a full transformation.
Okay. Excellent, John, and that does explain a lot of why Hertz made the decisions they made in your cloud transformation. Now, we've seen, Sanjeev, I don't know if you want to comment, but I've seen case studies from the IBM Enterprise system where they are marrying these systems of record to systems of engagement that are working on different cycles. And I often describe it as more of a Swiss watch, where you have gears that are big, gears that are small. Some gears are spinning very fast, and some gears are spinning much slower. But they all combine to really give you a fine timepiece, right, that keeps perfect time. And now that's a delicate operation, right, which is why Swiss watches are better than, or they say they're better than, watches made in other countries. But Sanjeev, what about you? What do you say?
Absolutely. I think you nailed it, Alan, and we've done that a lot with a lot of customers. Now, it is complex. It is not easy, just like making a Swiss watch is not easy, you know, if you want that level of precision, right? If you can go, with a big bang approach like Hertz did, nothing like it, because it resolves the issues. But if you have to go in a more organized manner where you're taking piece by piece and trying to synchronize all these efforts, we have found several areas that you need to focus on, and I'll just list off the top 5. I don't have time to go into each one of them. The first one is planning and architecture, right? Knowing where those dependencies are, knowing what those release cycles are for each one of those delivery pipelines, and understanding those dependencies is very critical. So you're not, hurrying up to wait, right? You got your fast-moving application done, but then you have to wait 3 months for the other applications to catch up. APIs, introducing an API economy to reduce those dependencies, and using APIs like an architectural contract between different applications and how they communicate is the second priority area. Third is environments, right? One of the contention which happens a lot is not just the speed but availability of environments, right? Because you need all the pieces to be there in order to test. So test virtualization of virtualizing services which are not available, or virtualizing environments which are not available becomes very critical. And deploying to those environments, automating those deployments across the board, whether you're doing slow moving or fast moving. Again, I hate to use the word speed, but you're getting the idea. Whether you're on a slower cycle or a faster cycle, being able to deploy on demand to the right kind of environments is critical. And lastly, release management, right? Because you can, again, hurry up and get stuck if your releases are not managed properly, and you don't know where everybody is in this grand plan, right? It's almost like the air traffic control, at an airport. They have to know where every airplane is, which one is running out of fuel, which one is needs to come into the flight path, and you can see the clockwork going on there with planes taking off and landing, simultaneously in multiple runways. So a lot of planning, a lot of understanding of the architecture, APIs, deployment automation, and virtualizing environments are 5 factors which need to be looked at in order to achieve that multi-speed IT, which you very elegantly described, Alan. So with that, again, I'll hand it back. I know I could go on for this for another hour, but
yeah, no, we're already way over, guys. Listen, there are 1 or 2, maybe 3 other questions. I've got them in writing. If I didn't get your question live here, I apologize. I'll submit them to our panel and try to get you written answers. Jules, if on the back end, if we can take care of that. You know what? I wish we could do these for an afternoon rather than an hour, but we have to be mindful of people's time. Raghu, John, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. You know what? We've got to do this again sooner than later. If it's okay, we'll talk offline about it, and we'll do a part 2 here. And try to make it even a little more interactive to allow some of the people, because they have some great questions. Sanjeev, as always, a pleasure having you on here. You bring real life, so many different experiences to this discussion. It is truly a great thing to have. All 3 of you, you guys rocked it on the panel today. For those of us who stayed here till the end, thank you so much for staying late. I apologize. I value your time, and I don't mean to go over, but I thought it was worth it today. Guys, thank you so much. This is Alan Shimel for DevOps.com. Thanks for joining us on this webinar, and we hope to see you soon at another DevOps.com webinar. Bye-bye, everyone.